Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to explore the incredibly fascinating life cycle of a business. I want you to imagine building a business exactly like a massive construction project. We're taking this from the very first blueprint sitting on an architect's desk all the way up to a towering skyscraper. It takes vision, it takes a ton of planning, and it absolutely takes some serious guts.
So, right off the bat, I have a question for you. Do you have what it takes to be an entrepreneur? Because by definition, an entrepreneur is a person who organizes, operates, and crucially, takes on the risk for a new business venture. It's really not just about having a great idea. It's about being that person willing to step onto the job site, strap on the hard hat, and actually make that idea a reality. Let's move to and see how this builds across our agenda today. First up, the entrepreneurial leap. Then, launching and measuring success. After that, strategies for business growth. And finally, the risks and realities.
Part 1. The entrepreneurial leap.
The honest truth is, not everyone is suited for this role, and that's okay. Successful entrepreneurs are notoriously hardworking, they're creative, optimistic, highly independent risk takers. But there's one skill here that I think constantly gets overlooked. They have to be incredibly effective communicators. Think about it. You could have the absolute best product in the world, but if you can't confidently talk to banks for funding, pitch to your customers, or navigate government agencies, well, your blueprint is literally never leaving the desk.
And this brilliantly illustrates the massive trade-off involved. On one hand, we've got the glamorous dream, right? Independence, putting your own ideas into practice, working on things you're actually personally interested in, and of course, the potential for immense success and wealth. But then, you've got the gritty reality. Huge risk, a massive need for capital, and often a pretty dangerous knowledge gap starting out. But the biggest one to really note here is the opportunity cost. By choosing to build your own dream, you are giving up the steady, reliable paycheck of being someone else's employee. That is a very real, tangible cost.
Moving on to Part 2, launching and measuring success.
You wouldn't build a house without a blueprint, right? And you absolutely shouldn't build a business without one either. A business plan is basically your comprehensive blueprint detailing 7 crucial steps. You've got to clearly define the business description, detail your products or services, deeply analyze your market, choose a location, figure out your organizational structure, crunch those financial forecasts, and map out your overall strategy. Doing all of this forces careful planning, which severely reduces your risk. Plus, banks almost always require you to hand over this exact blueprint before they'll even consider giving you a loan.
But hey, entrepreneurs aren't entirely alone out there. They often get some scaffolding to help them build. Most governments actively encourage startups by offering training advice, low-cost premises in enterprise zones, low-interest loans, and even grants for labor training or access to university research. Why do they do this? Well, because new businesses are literally the engine of a healthy economy. They create jobs, they increase consumer choice by driving up competition, and they boost the total economic output of a country. Put simply, the government really wants your building to go up.
So once your business is actually running, how do we measure the size of your new building? It's honestly a bit tricky because every single metric has its own limitations. For example, if we just count the number of employees, we might totally misjudge a capital-intensive firm. You know, a business that uses highly efficient robots to produce a massive output with barely any workers. On the flip side, a labor-intensive firm might have hundreds of workers but very little expensive machinery, making its capital employed look tiny. And measuring by sales value? That can be incredibly misleading if you're trying to compare, say, a local candy stall to a luxury car dealership.
All right, Part 3, strategies for business growth.
Welcome to the maturity phase. This is where owners look to expand to earn higher profits, gain more status, and really benefit from economies of scale, which basically means lowering your average costs as the business gets bigger. There are 2 main ways to build upward here. First, there's internal or organic growth. This is like adding new floors to your existing restaurant by slowly opening new branches one by one. It's slower, sure, but it's very manageable. On the other hand, we have external growth, also known as integration. This is when a business merges with or completely takes over another business. Going back to our metaphor, it's like just buying the fully built skyscraper next door. It's so much faster, but boy, is it a lot more complex.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that external integration comes in a few distinct flavors. The first one is horizontal integration. This happens when a business joins forces with a firm in the exact same industry, at the exact same stage of production.
To ground that textbook definition for a second, just picture 2 separate neighborhood bakeries. They both make and sell bread, right? If they decide to merge into one unified bakery business, that right there is horizontal integration. They are simply expanding their footprint on the exact same level of the playing field.
Then we have vertical integration. This is when you join with a firm in the same industry, but at an entirely different stage of production. You are essentially expanding your business's control by moving up or down your own supply chain.
Vertical integration actually happens in two directions. Forward integration means moving closer to the consumer. For instance, imagine a car manufacturer buying a retail car showroom so they can sell directly to the public. Backward integration, though, means moving to an earlier stage of production, further away from the consumer. Think of that exact same car maker buying a tire factory to secure their own parts supply. So you're either reaching forward to the customer or reaching backward to the raw materials.
The final type of external growth is conglomerate integration, which you'll often hear called diversification. This is when you join with a business in a completely different industry. Going back to our building metaphor, this is like buying a neighboring lot in a totally different market. Say, a clothing retailer suddenly buying a software company. Why do that? Well, just in case your primary market crashes. It's a strategy that's specifically designed to spread out your risk.
Which brings us to our final part. Part 4, the risks and realities. So the crucial point is that expansion can actually lead straight to failure if growing pains aren't met with the right structural fixes. A larger business naturally becomes much harder to control, requiring owners to step back, decentralize, and delegate. Poor communication across a huge chain of command can literally ruin a company, which means you absolutely have to invest in better IT systems. Also, growth is expensive. It leads to finance shortages. So sometimes the best solution is simply to force yourself to expand more slowly. And merging different corporate cultures, that causes massive management conflict, requiring incredibly clear, open communication with your workforce to keep the whole structure standing. It's also really important to realize that not every single business wants to be a giant corporation. Many stay small completely by choice because their industry requires a personal touch, like a local hair salon, or maybe they just operate in a very small niche market. Often, the owner simply wants to retain complete control and avoid the massive stress of running a mega corporation. However, when businesses do fail, and let's be honest, new businesses are at the absolute highest risk here, it's usually down to a few core things: a lack of management experience, an inability to adapt to a changing environment or new technology, or very simply, they just run out of finance.
We've watched the blueprint turn into a towering structure today, but as we've learned, bigger isn't automatically better. The right size for a business depends entirely on the foundation laid, the resources available, and the specific goals of the architect. So, to wrap up our journey through the business life cycle, I'm going to leave you with this final thought to reflect on. Whether it's a small neighborhood shop or a massive global conglomerate, what size is your ambition?